My inbox was a graveyard of "we regret to inform yous" until I decided to turn their automated rejections into my automated revolution. That's the short version. The long version involves 6 months of silent humiliation, a Python script named after a sound wave, and one very public meltdown from a woman who once described herself in a LinkedIn post as a champion of emerging talent. She used the word champion. I saved that post. I am getting ahead of myself. Here's what you need to know about Kian. Kian graduated top of his cohort with a marketing degree that cost more than his parents' first car. Kian had a portfolio. Kian had a personal brand. Kian had a Notion workspace color-coded by skill category, which, in retrospect, says everything you need to know about the kind of person he was trying to become and the kind of person he actually was. A 24-year-old sitting in his childhood bedroom, surrounded by motivational sticky notes, eating cereal at 2 p.m, refreshing his email. That was Kian. That was me. The agencies I was targeting were not random. There were 5 of them: Vanta Creative, Prism Strategy, Aurelius Focal Point, and the crown jewel Meridian Group. They were the ones whose campaigns showed up in every marketing textbook, the ones whose junior roles attracted 400 applicants per opening. And they all had the same automated hiring system, which I later discovered was a platform called TalentGate, which was essentially a bouncer with an algorithm and no sense of humor. You submitted your resume. TalentGate scanned it. TalentGate decided you were not a cultural fit based on criteria no human had reviewed in 3 years. TalentGate sent you a rejection email at exactly 9:02 in the morning, every time, which meant the system ran its batch processing at 9. I know this because I received 17 of those emails in 4 months. I know the exact time because I started logging them. That is the first detail you should remember, the log. The second detail, I applied to each agency 3 times using 3 slightly different versions of my resume. Same experience. Different formatting, different keywords, different section ordering. All 17 rejections. 2 from Vanta, 2 from Prism, 3 from Aurelius, 4 from Focal Point, and 6 from Meridian. 6 rejections from 1 agency in 4 months. I was not applying recklessly. I was applying strategically to different roles: junior copywriter, brand analyst, content strategist, campaign coordinator. TalentGate rejected all of them, always at 9:02, always with the phrase, "Your experience does not align with our current requirements." Always, every single one. Now, here is where I need to tell you about Delia Voss. Delia Voss was the chief talent officer at Meridian Group. 43 years old, silver-streaked hair she wore in a way that made it look intentional rather than natural, which it was. She had 11,000 LinkedIn followers and a newsletter called Human-Centered Hiring that she sent every second Wednesday. The newsletter was about things like psychological safety and authentic connection and the importance of seeing candidates as whole people. It had a nice font. She used the word champion at least once per issue. People in the industry loved her. She did panels. She did podcasts. She had a blurb in a business magazine about how Meridian's hiring process was a model of thoughtful, skills-first evaluation. I know this because I read every issue of her newsletter while eating cereal and receiving her automated rejections. There is a specific flavor of irony in being told at 9:02 that your experience does not align with current requirements by a company whose talent officer publishes weekly essays about seeing candidates as whole people. I did not email her about this. I did not post about it. I wrote it in a plain text document on my laptop titled notes.txt, and I closed the laptop and I went for a walk. Preet thought I should just apply to different agencies. Preet was my best friend from university, now working at a mid-sized consultancy, perfectly happy, perplexed by my specific fixation on the top 5. He said over the phone that the market was the market, that maybe TalentGate just hated my resume format, that I should let it go. I told him I would think about it. I was not going to let it go. I was thinking about something else entirely. Here is what I was actually thinking about. If TalentGate's algorithm was screening out my application every single time, it was doing so based on pattern recognition. Keywords, formatting, document structure, section headers. The system was trained on a data set of successful hires, resumes that had made it through, and it was comparing my resume against that model. I was being filtered not because I was unqualified, but because I did not look like the template. The template was invisible. But templates leave traces. I had 17 rejected resumes and a working knowledge of Python I had picked up in the 6 weeks after my first rejection because I had decided at that point to do something with the time I was not spending at a job. This is the part Preet later called insane and the most Kian thing you have ever done, which is fair. Most people, when rejected from a job, update their resume or try a different industry. I decided to reverse engineer the machine that was rejecting me. I am aware this is not a normal response. I spent 3 weeks building what I eventually called resonance. The name came from the physics concept, the frequency at which a system vibrates most efficiently. The idea was simple, at least in concept. I scraped every publicly available piece of data from those 5 agencies. Job postings going back 4 years, LinkedIn profiles of every junior hire they had made in that period, their published case studies, their award submissions, the bios of their existing staff. I ran natural language processing on all of it to identify the specific vocabulary, structural patterns, and skill framing that their systems, and therefore talent gate, associated with successful candidates. Then I built a tool that could take any resume and reformat it to score higher on that pattern recognition. Not lying, not fabricating credentials. Just translation. Speaking the machine's language instead of my own. The first time I ran my resume through Resonance, the output was a disaster. A garbled mess of buzzwords and broken formatting. My stomach sank. The script had merged case studies with contact info and repeated my university name 8 times. For a full afternoon, I thought the entire project was a failure, a monument to my own hubris. I almost deleted the whole directory. But the logic was sound. The data was there. The error was in the assembly. So I spent another week rebuilding the parsing engine and building a second layer. A naturalizing filter that distributed the keywords more organically and varied the syntax so the result sounded like a person rather than in CO brief. I ran it through a readability scorer, then tweaked, then ran it again. I did this 11 times until the output was clean. Until it was perfect. Preet called on a Thursday evening and I was in the middle of my 8th test iteration. He asked what I had been doing. I told him I had been working on a side project. He asked if I'd eaten today. I said probably. He drove over with takeout and I showed him what Resonance did, and he was quiet for a long time, eating rice, staring at my laptop screen. Then he said quietly that I needed to either apply for a patent or apply for therapy, and that he would support me either way. I told him I was going to do neither and just submit the resume. He said, "Are you sure this could not blow up?" I said I was not sure about anything. That was the most honest I had been in 6 months. I submitted to all 5 agencies on a Monday, Meridian first. Then Focal Point, Aurelius, Prism, Vanta. Same roles I had applied to before. Same underlying experience. Resonance processed presentation. 9:02 on Tuesday morning, no rejection emails. I checked 3 times, I refreshed the log, nothing. By Wednesday, I had interview requests from Prism and Focal Point. By Thursday, Aurelius and Vanta had written too. Meridian took until Friday, which felt thematically appropriate. 5 agencies, 4 responses in a week. The 5th, Ilia's agency, came at 11:17 on a Friday, not at 9:02, which meant a human had written it. The email said they were very impressed with my profile and would love to schedule a call at my earliest convenience. I sat with that email for a while. The room was quiet. My cereal was on the desk, gone soggy. I looked at the 17 rejection entries in my log. I looked at the new email. I did not feel triumphant. I felt something stranger, which I later identified as the specific feeling of having been right about something you wished you were wrong about. Because being right meant the system was exactly as broken as you thought. I prepared for the interviews, all 5. I was not going to sabotage anything or make a speech. I was going to go in, perform well, and see what happened. The Prism interview went fine. Focal Point offered me a second round. Aurelius and Vanta were pleasant, professional. Meridian was last. Delia Voss ran the Meridian first round interview herself. This was unusual. She explained it by saying she personally liked to meet every promising candidate at the early stage, which I stored in the back of my mind alongside the word champion and the phrase whole people. She was exactly as polished in person as her newsletter suggested. She asked good questions. She laughed at the right moments. She said my portfolio showed real intuitive understanding of audience resonance, which landed with a specific irony she had no way of knowing about. At the end, she said she had one final question. How had I heard about Meridian? I said I had been following the company's work for a while. She said she loved that kind of authentic connection to the brand. I said thank you. The twist, when it came, did not come from Meridian. Focal Point made me an offer first, a real one. Junior strategist, competitive salary, start in 3 weeks. I accepted. I gave myself a weekend before I told anyone. Preet came over Saturday and I told him, and he did something I had not expected, which was get very quiet and then ask if I was going to do anything with Resonance. I said I had not decided. He said, because it works, and there are a lot of people like you. I said I knew that. I said I had been thinking about it. What I had actually been thinking about was this. During the Meridian interview, Delia had mentioned, in passing, the way people mention things they consider solved. That Meridian had recently upgraded their TalentGate subscription to a premium tier that included something called Candidate IQ, an additional screening layer, more sophisticated pattern matching. She had said this proudly, the way someone describes a new appliance. She said it had dramatically improved their filtering efficiency. I had nodded and written nothing down because I did not need to. 3 weeks after I started at Focal Point, I posted Resonance on GitHub, open source, free. A 2-paragraph readme explaining what it did and why I had built it to surface the gap between a hiring platform's stated values and its actual filtering behavior. No call to arms, no manifesto. Just the tool and the explanation. I posted it on a Tuesday evening and went to bed. By Thursday, it had 400 stars. By Friday, a recruiter on LinkedIn had shared it with a caption about automation bias in hiring. By the following Monday, it had been picked up by 2 tech newsletters and a human resources industry blog, which described it as a provocative interrogation of algorithmic gatekeeping. I went to work. I made coffee. I read through my notifications on the train. The response from the agencies came in stages. Focal Point, my actual employer, said nothing officially, though my manager, a calm, measured woman named Fenn, asked me quietly in the kitchen whether residence was mine, and I said yes. She poured her coffee and said, "So you applied here using your own tool?" I said yes. She said, "And now you work here?" I said yes. She said, "Huh," and went back to her desk. That was the entirety of that conversation. Banta and Prism released statements about the importance of authentic candidate representation, which was a polite way of saying they were unhappy without specifying why they were unhappy. Because specifying would have required admitting that their filters were doing something they could not defend publicly. Aurelius said nothing. Focal Point said nothing publicly. Meridian's response was different. Ilya Voss published a LinkedIn post. My phone buzzed with the link from Preet before I saw it myself. I opened it on the train, my thumb hovering over her name. The post was long. It started by acknowledging the conversation happening in the industry around hiring technology. The corporate way of saying, "I have seen the thing and I am now managing it." She wrote that residents raised important questions. That Meridian believed in transparent, human-centered evaluation. That she personally reviewed every shortlisted candidate. That no algorithm replaced human judgment. She used the word champion. She tagged several industry thought leaders. It had 412 likes in the first hour. Then came the 3rd paragraph, a pivot. She wrote that tools like Resonance, while well-intentioned, ultimately gamed systems that existed for good reason. That candidates who relied on them were perhaps not demonstrating the authentic voice that great agencies required. She didn't name me. The tool had my name on it. She didn't have to. The train car felt hot. My own authentic voice was a knot in my throat. Preet texted a single question mark. I sent back a thumbs up. He called instantly. "Are you going to respond?" I told him not the way she expects. "What do you mean?" he asked. I said I'd been keeping a log since my first rejection. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Oh, that quiet. The kind that means someone has just understood something they probably should have guessed earlier." Back at my apartment, I opened the folder. The document had been sitting there for 6 months, a ghost in the machine. It contained an anonymized analysis of the timing patterns for my 17 rejections, cross-referenced with the public hiring values of the 5 agencies. No drama. No names, just the data. Every 902 email, a data point. Every newsletter with the word champion, a data point. I took a breath, attached it as a supplementary document, a data appendix, to the Resonance GitHub page and pushed the update. My mouse clicked. The page refreshed. It was done. For an hour, nothing. Then the first comment appeared on the original LinkedIn share of the tool. "Have you seen the data appendix?" Then another. Then a tweet from a business school professor linking directly to my analysis. 3 journalists emailed asking for comment. I replied to each with the same line. The document speaks for itself. I watched as the likes on Delia's post slowed. The comments began to change. Someone asked why Meridian's rejections all arrived at 9:02 a.m. if a human was reviewing them. The thought leader she had tagged went silent. One of them, a consultant who'd previously praised Meridian's culture, posted a new thread on algorithmic bias. He never mentioned Delia or Meridian, but he cited my data appendix. Twice. Delia posted nothing else that week. Her newsletter, which arrived every second Wednesday, did not arrive the following Wednesday. I checked. The Wednesday after that, it returned. The issue was about resilience and organizational culture. It did not mention hiring technology. The word champion did not appear. I did not post about this. I told Preet over the phone and he laughed for a long time. The kind of laugh that starts genuine and then becomes slightly uncomfortable and then becomes genuine again. He said she had not even connected it publicly to you. I said I knew. He said so she just quietly adjusted. I said yes. He said, "Is that enough?" I thought about that for a while. It was a real question, not rhetorical. I thought about the 17 emails at 9:02. I thought about the phrase "does not align with current requirements." I thought about whole people. I thought about the log I had started keeping on a whim that turned out to be the spine of everything. I thought about how the point was never to humiliate anyone. The point was to make the invisible visible and then put a door in the wall. 4 months after posting Resonance, I got an email from a 22-year-old in Birmingham who had used the tool to land her first marketing role after 2 years of rejections. She said she had cried. She said, "Thank you. I read the email twice. I was eating lunch. My serial days were over. I wrote back a 2-line reply. You did the work, the tool just translated it. Let me know how the first month goes. I closed the laptop. Outside the focal point office, the city was doing what cities do. Noise, movement, someone's coffee going cold on a windowsill 3 floors up. I went back to my desk. Fen was already in a meeting. The afternoon was ordinary, which is exactly what I had been working toward for 6 months. Not triumph, not a speech. Just an ordinary afternoon in a job I had earned, in a building that had invited me in on purpose, at a desk where no one was counting how long I had been there. I had one more unread email in my personal inbox. Subject line regarding your application, 902 timestamp. Old habit. I had left one unprocessed resume in an old portal from before residence existed. I opened it. We regret to inform you. I marked it read, archived it, and got back to work. Rejection algorithm, my sweet revenge.